between Donald Trump and Deutsche Bank, it's very complicated. Can you just kind of untangle it for us a little bit?
I can try. It goes back 20 years. Starting in the late 1990s, Deutsche Bank was trying to make a name for itself on Wall Street. No one had heard of this German bank. No one knew how to pronounce its name even. And the way it could win business in the U.S. was by doing business with clients that were considered too risky, too far out there to be touchable by other banks. And so they would get in bed with big real estate developers, among others, and throw money at them. And Donald Trump was one such real estate developer. He was a guy who had repeatedly defaulted on loans, repeatedly cost his banks millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars, in fact. And for Deutsche Bank, this was the type of client that they were going after.
He had cost other banks hundreds of millions of dollars.
He had repeatedly defaulted on loans to other banks. So yes, a number of other banks, Citibank, a number of other banks as well, had faced huge losses.
I mean, I think a lot of people will say, like, how can somebody who's defaulted on loans to banks in the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars actually then get another bank? I mean, were they desperate? I mean, they saw the red flags, but they just didn't care.
That's exactly right. They were desperate. They wanted to win business so badly that they were willing to look the other way. And this wasn't like a rogue banker or a rogue division of a bank. This was a conscious decision throughout the bank that went up to the very highest levels.
He was borrowing from different divisions in the bank.
Over time, he did. So he started off in the investment bank, borrowing money from them. He defaulted on those loans, and that part of the bank stopped doing business with him. He goes to another part of the bank. They do loans. He defaults on those loans. They stop doing business with him. And finally, it gets to the private bank, which is the part of the company that caters to really rich people. Right. And they strike up a relationship with him. And each time, there's fierce resistance within the bank from the people who he's previously burned. And yet they keep going down this road with him, often with the blessing of the CEO.
Was part of it, I mean, that banks are drawn to, celebrity and wanting to... give him breaks that they wouldn't give anybody else.
Yeah, that is part of it. Deutsche Bank was so eager to make a name for itself that they were going for clients that were splashy. And Donald Trump was splashy to them. And they would trot him out to their golf tournament where he would work the crowd signing $100 bills. He would sit down for promotional interviews, basically TV commercials, where he would extol his relationship with Deutsche Bank, how easy they were to work with. Ivanka Trump would do the same thing. So this was a very powerful marketing device for the bank.
I've never really heard of that, of people who are getting loans from bank out essentially doing commercials for the bank and public appearances.
It's pretty weird. It's something that I hadn't really heard of until I started digging into this. And it struck people within the bank as weird, too. I mean, I've talked to some of the people who were doing these interviews, and they would say, what's it like to do business with Deutsche Bank, thinking they're just going to be some platitudes. And Trump would come back and say, it's amazing. You're so fast. You don't ask too many questions. And the people behind the camera would sit there and say, ooh, is this a good idea? And yet everyone knew within the bank that they were really going head over heels into relationships that had the potential to cause problems.
It's fascinating that one sector of the bank would ignore, one division would ignore what other employees were saying based on their own personal experience, that it just happened to them. I understood, according to your reporting, at some point between the election and the inauguration, Deutsche Bank actually banned its employees on Wall Street from mentioning the name Trump?
Yeah, around the time that Trump became the Republican nominee for president, people at the bank started realizing that maybe this has the potential to cause some trouble, political and reputational blowback for the bank. And so by the time he got elected, they were in full panic mode. And among other things, what they said to employees on Wall Street is, do not utter the word Trump in internal communications or external communications. And these being Wall Street traders, that edict inevitably was violated. And people were hauled into the compliance department and given kind of a browbeating. And the explanation they gave was, which I found really interesting, is that the bank was very concerned about what would happen if Trump, as was his wont to do, stopped paying back his loans again. And at that point, the bank would be faced with this very ugly choice between, on the one hand, seizing the president's assets, which is obviously not a very attractive path to go down, but on the other hand, not seizing the president's assets, which is essentially giving a very lucrative financial break to the most powerful person in the world, and that's ugly too.
Which it seems like they've been doing anyway for years in different ways.
Yeah, I think it's safe to say that without Deutsche Bank, Donald Trump very well might not be president.
Because he would have gone out of business long ago.
He would have gone out of business. He was able on the campaign trail to blunt a lot of the attacks about his finances. And Hillary Clinton kept making these kind of flat jokes about how, I've read the books on Donald Trump, they all seem to end at chapter 11. And that was actually a pretty good argument in theory because Trump's entire appeal, or a large part of his appeal, was that he was a successful businessman.
Right.
And so Trump was able to brandish his warm relationship with Deutsche Bank as a weapon to kind of beat back those attacks. And he could say accurately, look, for all my sins and all my problems, I have a very good relationship with one of the most powerful banks in the world.
It's so fascinating reporting. David, thank you so much.
It's my pleasure.